Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the August 4th, 2025 Lake Washington School Board Study Session. Let the record reflect that all board members are present with the exception of Director Yoakum, who is excused. The first item on our agenda this afternoon is levy planning. Dr. Holman.
Yes, so this is I think the fourth time that we've had the conversation related to levy planning. I think the ongoing conversation reflects maybe the complexity of not only the times, but the decision and the importance of the decision that this board has to make related to seeking funding from our community. It's an important decision that the board is making, and so I appreciate the ongoing conversation, the questions that the board has raised. Also appreciate Associate Superintendent Posthumus and the work she's done related to long-term budget implications, some of the changes that we're experiencing as a district in terms of, and you'll hear this throughout the presentation tonight, the idea of budget planning as we're growing is a much different experience than budget planning when we're declining in enrollment. And levy has implications for that as well. And so tonight we are working to respond to a number of questions related to both the educational programs and operations and capital levies. We have some, I'll just call them scenarios or options that we're continuing to refine as we narrow in on a recommendation that we'll bring to the board. Our work tonight is about trying to put context around some of the changes that are known and some of those things that are unknown that we not only believe but actually have some evidence that will come to fruition. We also have some staff compensation related budget items that we'll share with the board that are different in a declining enrollment environment, which is something that as we were growing for so many years, it really wasn't part of our budget planning. And so we'll share that with the board as well. And put into context not only dollar amounts, but implications for tax rates and how that relates to our long-term budget. So with that, I'll hand it to Associate Superintendent Posthumus.
All right, thank you very much. All right, tonight, as Dr. Holman said, we are going to review our EP&O considerations and review our capital levy considerations. Again, we last shared information with the board in June. This is an overview of our timeline. We've discussed levy in March with the board, again in May, in June, and here we are tonight in August. And since that time, we've also been engaging with our Facility Advisory Committee to provide feedback on our facility portion of our capital projects levy. We also engaged in a community survey, and we shared that at the June meeting. And then we have our levy advisory committee that met in May and June, and we'll have one more meeting next Tuesday. So we'll start with the education programs and operations levy. So as a reminder, these are things that we're, the district can raise local levies to enrich basic education. The reality is it's filling the funding gaps that the state does not provide enough funding. And school districts must be renewed, levies must be renewed every 4 years. So it pays for the operations beyond what the state funds. And it provides about 16% of the 25-26 budget. So reminder, this is the chart that you've seen many times, is the funding gap. The blue, dark blue-gray bars represent what the state or grants fund, and then the red part is really the gap, what it actually costs to operate the school district and provide the services that our community expects. And so the biggest costs are for our certificated staff. both in, we hire more staff than the state provides, and then we also, the cost of retaining those staff are more than what the state funds us for. And then activities and athletics is 100% funded by levy and fees. And then special education, we've had many conversations about that. That's still $22 million underfunded by the state. And then this is a chart showing the history of our levy authority. The first column is the per pupil amount over time between 2019 and 2025. The next column is our enrollment changes. And that's the enrollment that is used for the levy lid calculation. That's a number that OSPI determines based on our average annual. It includes running start, it includes some summer school numbers, and then the levy authority calculation in millions of dollars, and then the change in our authority over time. So you can see how that's changed. Go ahead.
Barbara pointed out, I think in June, and it was something that I knew, but it was something that I think I had forgotten. You can see in 2022 through 2021 through 23, we have the same enrollment number. And that really was, if you will, a hold harmless that districts were allowed to do. So when we think about budget issues that school districts are facing, one of those cliffs that school districts experienced was because of the enrollment factor. And for us, we had a smaller enrollment decline than not only regionally, but really across the state. When the average was about a 10% decline, we had about a 2.5%.
1.6 at the time.
1.6
At the time, yeah.
And so that drop for us was substantially less, but for others, that was a massive gap that occurred for them between the 23 and the 24 collection years. So it's another piece of the kind of funding equation that we haven't really talked much about, but that was a big drop off for us, but also for districts across the state.
Right. And many districts had the levy authority, and so that holding them harmless allowed them to collect those dollars. So, okay, and then again, this is not a new slide, but the projected levy authority with the change in the legislation, again, they increase the per pupil amount by $500 per pupil, and then they're also adding 3.3% to the annual calculation of CPI, and so it's about a 5%, depending on the CPI, 5 to 6% change in that. So this is the new, the fourth column is the new levy authority. And again, we've shared also, we're assuming a flat enrollment going forward, and that provides contingency should, again, our enrollment not decline as we're projecting. So again, you can see the change in the percent there. And the per pupil amount, this is based on OSPI's estimate in May. I do expect them to update that in September, which timing-wise, what they will update is probably the outlying CPI numbers. They do update it every quarter or so. Okay.
How many years out do they project CPI?
4 typically. 4 or 5. So then this chart shows that, so the first column is, again, the new legislative levy authority, or LID. And then the third column is kind of what we assumed in our budget going forward, which is the 5% annual growth. And then you can see the difference in the last column. And then so the last year of the current 4-year levy is 2026. So our voters have approved the $99.1 million. So even though we have levy authority of 118 next year, we can only collect the 99.1. So we talked a little bit about the EP&O assumptions. We're calculating calculating the levy authority based on a level enrollment, and that creates capacity should the legislature change assumptions in the levy formula. The challenge, there's, benefits of a 4-year going out every 4 years is you don't have to go back and ask your community for a levy every year or every 2 years. The challenge with 4 years is you're trying to estimate really 6 years into the future when you go out, because you're working on your estimates, for the levy election, and then when the election happens, you're still not collecting it for another year, and then you've got 4 years after that. So it's really, and typically most school districts by the 3rd or 4th year of the levy, things have changed, assumptions have changed. And so it really is beneficial to ensure that you're creating some capacity because things do change. And as a reminder, should the voter approved amount be greater than what OSPI determines a district's levy authority is, you can only collect the maximum of the levy authority. And so then you're required to do what's called a rollback. If your voters approved a higher amount, you have to roll that back to what the OSPI says that you can do. Lake Washington hasn't been in that situation in a while, but it used to be something we did on an annual basis. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to share is kind of how does the levy that we collect kind of break down. And so this is an estimate of kind of that local need or gap between what state and federal funding provides and we bridge that local gap, with fees, donations, and the majority of that is the levy. And so we have, the majority, as you can see, of the need is related to staffing for programs, providing staff for ML, special education, all of the programs that we need to support our district, and its staff and the compensation that the state does not provide, and the insurance funding that the state does not fully fund, substitutes, things like that is all part of that category. And the last column just shows kind of of that 82 million is about 17% of the total expenditures in our budget. So, and then the other category is staffing for social emotional learning and safety and security. So those are all of our counselors, our nurses, our health support, mental health supports. And that's about, and then our security personnel, and that's about almost 16 million. And the levy provides almost half of the staff needed for those programs. And then professional learning, that is the extra days that we the state funds 3 days. We provide our teachers with 8 days for training before, so that they're prepared not only before students arrive, but during the school year. And so so that provides 21 million, or about 80% of what we spend on professional learning. Athletics and extracurricular activities, that it's about $10 million, and again, that's about 88%. And this also includes our community services program for our performing arts and stadiums. So that's why it's not shown at 100%, because our community services programs, there's fees and things like that in there. And then additional course offerings, that's additional courses and staffing, so that's our 0 period, 7 period classes, and extra courses and staff to provide support for students to ensure they graduate and are college ready. And so that's about 100% of that funding. And then a small amount for early learning, preschool, our Ready Start, and our Head Start programs. So it's about 700,000, but it provides 30% of that program. So overall, this isn't a 1-year number, it's kind of an average number over 4 years, but that's about the need, the local need. So just, so we were talking about kind of, so how does what's the kind of an explanation of the cumulative impact of our unfunded costs and kind of our, revenue and enrollment changes? And so how does the cumulative impact to our budget situation kind of impact our levy needs? And so, so the top part of this is so for the future 4 years, when our enrollment, when we decline in enrollment, as we've discussed, we lose both not only revenue, but our expenditures are reduced. But when you're declining in enrollment, your revenues drop faster than you can reduce expenditures. And the opposite is true. When we were growing, we would bring in more revenues than we would need to add for the growing add in expenditures. So the net impact of the enrollment loss is about 3.5 million. And then the local impact of state mandated compensation, and that is not only COLA, but it's insurance, health and insurance, and then the pension requirements. And so those over time, in a 4-year period, that impacts us about 20 million. And then fixed cost increases. We've talked about the significant changes in insurance, but it's also our changes in utilities. That's about a $6 million cost in fixed costs. And so overall, there's a 4-year change or increase in expenditures of about 30 million. Now, most recently, our state has provided a very small amount of revenue for MSOCs. So that's materials, supplies, and operating costs. So we can offset that, some of that, by that, and then the rest we needed to offset some by realigning our budget. So we realigned our budget, made adjustments, and 7.5 million and of that, and that's and so the net impact is 10.6 of the revenue and the budget alignment. So overall, the 30 million and the 10 million is a net impact of 19 million. So that's just an examples of what happens in a kind of a 4-year period, and the impacts to your budget, and why the local costs, continue to be needed and increase. So some of the factors that we wanted to talk about for considering the additional EP&O authority, we've talked about the staff compensation costs that are continuing to exceed state funding. We've talked about enrollment declines. Those continue to create additional shortfalls. We've talked about fixed costs. Some of the new things that happened over the summer is the continued conversation about federal funding, and I've got some slides going forward with some more details on that. But, OSPI let us know over the summer that the administration had frozen some of our federal dollars that we were expecting this fall, and that school districts should count on not receiving those dollars. For us, that was about $1 million, but many districts across the state, it was multi-millions. It was, very significant impacts to districts across our state. And so again, I'll go into more detail on those, but there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And so that's something new that we weren't really talking about, in the spring. And then the other pieces that is just, ongoing strategic investments, it would be, we know that over time there's going to be changes that we're going to want to make, additional investments in our schools and in our community. And so we need to make sure that we're planning for that. We also know that even though that we've got a balanced budget this year and the next year, but our budget shows that our expenditures will exceed our revenues beginning in 2028. And so that's really the second year of the levy. And so while it's not, it doesn't start out as significant numbers, it's $1 million, and then the next year it's $2 million. over time, that adds up. And as new things come into play, then, so we need to be looking ahead to, because over 4 years, if nothing changes, that use of fund balance could be upwards of, 6.2 million. Over 6 years, it's about 12.7 million. So those are and then we've talked about just, again, our desire to maintain the current programs and staff that we have. So I've talked a little bit about this already. We know, so we've balanced our budget, but expenditures begin to exceed revenues in 28-29, year 2 of the levy. And the other factors that John mentioned kind of at the beginning that influence our move ahead budget. One of the things that we are having to kind of change our thinking on is that when you are a growing district with enrollment, you're hiring a lot of staff, and you're hiring, as experienced staff retire, you're bringing in new staff. And so when you look at how staff are paid on a salary schedule that has a lot of steps, and you bring in a lot of new staff, your costs are actually lower. And so when enrollment is declining, you're not doing a lot of hiring, and so your experience levels of your staff increase. And prior to McCleary, districts received funding based on the experience levels of their staff. And so, if our staff experience increased, we received increased funding from the state. If our staff experience decreased, we received decreased funding from the state. So in post McCleary, your staff experience does not have any impact on your funding. So as districts whose enrollment's declining, therefore you're hiring less new teachers, your staff experience is growing. So those are expenditures that increase, that are challenging to plan for, so to speak. And so the other thing, the other piece is, in the last few years, I'd say in the last 6 years, our classified schedules for our classified staff have expanded to include more salary steps. And so those step increases aren't funded by the state. That's a local cost. And so that is also something that is continuing to have an impact on that compounds our local compensation costs. So there's ongoing increases there. And so we just need to kind of, when we were in a growing, when our budget was growing, some of those impacts could be covered by that kind of growth, that difference between the revenue related to enrollment and the expenditures needed. But in a declining area, it takes districts longer to respond when your revenues decline. And so those issues are exacerbated. So those are the things we're kind of digging more into, is kind of that impact of those step increases. So go ahead.
Is it also true that the local cost of the inflationary adjustment increases as a percent of the amount we receive from the state when we have staff that are higher in their step schedule? Because we receive COLA based on the
Just a base. We receive COLA based on a base, so yes,
Right.
So our local cost is compounded in a
Right.
sense. Yes, that's correct. And then the last item is the loss of federal funds. Leah.
So just making sure I understand. Pre-McCleary, state funding for certificated and classified staff as well? Only
Just
certificated staff?
for,
Based off of tenure of that employee,
yeah.
the proportion the state would give us would increase based off of tenure. And then post McCleary, it's a flat amount for every certificated staff,
Correct.
regardless of how long they've worked.
Correct.
And what was the justification for that change?
So it was really to remove the state from a state salary schedule. So it used to be that the state published the salary schedule, and for the majority of districts, they paid off the state salary schedule. There were districts that could pay if you had a different schedule than the state did, which Lake Washington was one of those districts. You still had to follow what's called basic ed compliance or salary compliance, and you couldn't pay more than what the state gave you in compensation. So even though you had maybe different salary, steps or levels, the net cost still had to be within what the state provided. And why the state did that, they wanted to get out of the business of, I think, providing a step schedule. I mean, that was their choice of how they funded a different base, and then they funded a regionalization factor, and did it differently. So.
Thank you.
And some districts, with less experienced staff benefited at the time, and there were other districts with very experienced staff, even more so than our staff, did not. That was challenging. They had to reduce their budgets. So, okay, so I just threw an example of kind of what is a step increase. And so the impact of kind of our step increases for both CERT and classified is around $3 to $5 million a year. So in a 4-year period, that's, $15 to $20 million. Should be, anyway, $15 to $20 million. On average, that should be 12. I know. So should be 12. Federal, and then just I put in the federal grant reductions of $1 million. And so ongoing, if we get this $1 million federal grant reduction, again, I'll get into more details in a future slide, but that's 16, or it should be, 13 to 21 million. So quite a range. So let's talk about federal funding. So what we're, so some of the things we've been hearing is, they've been reducing the staffing to support federal programs in Head Start. So far, we haven't been told specifically that our like Washington's Head Start funds are changing, but we know that there's been a lot of, reductions in kind of the support areas. They delayed, in some cases, allocating Head Start funding. They froze $6 billion in funding, again, $1 million impact to Lake Washington, but they did, 2 weeks ago, recently release that. And the 2026 federal spending bill still has those frozen funds eliminated. So even though we've now got a reprieve, so to speak, that we are expecting to get our $1 million, the federal funds are in the budget to be eliminated for next year. And then there's continued talk about eliminating the Department of Education. And what that might do is change, again, the funding mechanism. And so they'll give money directly to the states. When they do that, they typically give it in block grants and then say, state, you decide how to divvy it up. But they also then tend to reduce the funding when they give it in block grants. So example, what you may get, you may receive 70% of what you received before in a block grant, and then the state has to decide how to allocate it. And so all of those impacts, are potential. And so this slide, and I know it's a lot of words on there, but so just use your glasses. But these are all all of our federal revenue and federal programs. So the first column is what we call the revenue code. So that's the federal revenue code. And the next / and then it's the expenditure program. So these numbers match up in the budget document. And then the name of the program, and then the purpose. So you've got 7 million, the largest money that we receive is 7.6 million of special education dollars. And initially, again, the federal government was supposed to provide the majority of the support for our special education students, and we know that they do not do that. And even every year, our allocations can increase or decrease. But for example, special education, even we're getting about $125,000 less than we originally planned for 25-26. So they can change the allocations at any time. So I bolded, the other big number is our Title I, that's the fourth one down, so that provides our safety net programs, that's about $1 million. But the two below that are the bolded ones. Those were the ones that were frozen, and we were planning for those to go away. Luckily, we are receiving them next year. I think the amounts, one of them is, I think, about $40,000 lower than we were expecting, but again, ultimately, we still do have the grants for 25-26. And then you can see nutrition services is another big area. That's to provide free and reduced breakfast reimbursement, lunch and breakfast reimbursement. So altogether, all of our federal programs are $13.5 million annually. So should all of that money go away, that would be a big challenge for the district and all districts across the state and country. So,
Director Choi, did you have a question?
I did. You actually answered it, but then I thought of another one.
okay.
What is the guidance for OSPI in terms of reductions in federal funding for looking out?
So the guidance that Superintendent Reichdahl's provided so far is to start to plan for specifically those two grants being eliminated. We don't have information around what federal funding will look like in the future in terms of block grants. What will happen is if the state receives money in a block grant, then SPI will have to figure out how do we then allocate those dollars. And if it's reduced funding, they'll then have to create some sort of mechanism. And so, I think about, our title need versus others. And, unfortunately, we have, when you think of the number of students living in low-income households in Lake Washington School District, it's north of 4,000 students. That's larger than half of the districts in the state of Washington. Yet when you look at the percent of the whole, we're a very low percent. And so if you just rank order districts on the percent of students living in poverty, free and reduced lunch, we're never going to reach, in that top quartile or even the top half of school districts. And so, this is just my thinking about, I could see our title dollars being significantly reduced in a block grant scenario because of that assumption that, the need is not as great in a district like Lake Washington, even though we have so many students that are receiving free and reduced supports. In terms of special education, again, if the overall funding is reduced, then OSPI will have to figure out how do we allocate those dollars, and either that's a change in the per pupil allocation or safety net goes away. There's a number of different ways that OSPI could make determinations on how to allocate those dollars. And none of that has been shared or discussed. So it's just me kind of thinking about what are some of the ways that I could see them making adjustments. So, but anytime, we actually receive communication from Superintendent Reichdahl every Friday related to federal matters. Just, he kind of has an ongoing spreadsheet that he keeps updated just to try and keep school districts informed. And so him and his team, they actually do a really nice job of documenting all of this and providing guidance when there's something actionable.
I had one other question too on you mentioned that the 2026 federal spending bill has those federal funds eliminated, and knowing that the federal fiscal calendar does not align with ours. I believe the federal fiscal year starts in October, or maybe November, whereas we start in September. So which budget cycle, kind of lining up when those funds are eliminated, what budget cycle does that fall in for us? Is that something that's a concern for 25, 26, or is it looking more
Yeah,
forward?
it is, they are telling us to expect the cuts for our 26, 27 budget. So again, once the once they unfroze, so to speak, our allocations, then OSPI had our preliminary allocations in our grant system right away, and we could easily see them, and so they were very responsive in sharing the dollars, so we could compare kind of what we thought versus what we had. So the good news is there wasn't a significant change in the dollars once they were unfrozen. So okay, so what we have shared in prior presentations is kind of, here's the levy amount at full authority. You can see it for the 4 years of the February 26th levy covers the calendar years 2027 through 2030. And so the second column reflects the full authority dollar amount for the levy. Again, based on current OSPI estimates. So it would be an average of 136.4 million per year. And then the rate per thousand on the right, so it would be $1 in the first year and then slowly declining to 93 cents in the fourth year. So an average of 97 cents. And then one of the other kind of another scenario that we are looking at is stepping up to full authority, so not requesting a levy amount for the full amount in the first year, but the last year would be the full amount. So just slowly stepping up, and so that levy amount ranges from 117 in the first year, and I'll just go back a slide. So it was 125 million in the first year. Then in the 130s, and then 147. This is 117, then 126, 136, and then 147 in the last year. So an average of 131.9 over the 4 years, and it would be a level rate of 93 cents for each of the 4 years. And then in the last column, I just showed the difference from full authority. So the first year, it's about $8 million less than full authority, then $6 million, then $3 million. And then it's the same in that last 4 years. So the other thing I wanted to show is,
Just a real
Yes.
quick question.
Yeah.
How does that translate to the individual homeowner? Do we have a figure on that?
I'll show you those
I was
in
wondering if
the
that was
future.
coming.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, and then the other piece I put together is kind of just the levy authority. There's kind of three, the first column versus our budget assumptions by calendar year. So our budget assumptions is in the first column. And then the levy authority graduated at, the step up is in the second column. And then the difference column is the difference of the graduated assumption to budget. So you can see 13 million in the first year to 26 million in the fourth year. And then the next column is the full levy authority, and then the difference from the graduated. And those are the same numbers that you saw on the previous slide. So it just kind of lays it all out in one place. Yep. Yeah.
The budget assumption, we're not assuming the same, the budget assumption assumes some amount of growth still in a collection, right? Could you remind me how?
Yes, it did. It assumed about a 5% a year growth in the amount.
And what's the reason
that
for
was-
assuming that growth?
Well, it was based on kind of the previous levy authority.
Okay.
And it was also based on, really it was based on kind of what we thought the levy authority would be, and then knowing, and there was some, I think, declining enrollment in there, but, and it was also just based on our AV assumptions too at the time.
Got it. Okay.
So as I've worked through all of this, one of the idea that our budget continues to increase the levy amount is one of the reasons why the difference from budget to the authority is really important, because it isn't based on what we're collecting today. It's really based on what we've planned for in the budget. And so our long-term budget actually assumes the levy increase on an annual basis. If that, and so our status quo assumes an ongoing increase of our EP&O.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
I understand, but it doesn't assume, I don't think it assumes a tax, like a rate increase necessarily for home, like a per.
Correct.
Per rate increase.
Correct.
It's a
Right.
function of growing AV and all
Right.
those other things that have resulted in more authority over time. Yeah, no, I
Correct.
get it.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, but it may be
Yeah.
answered, so I'm just gonna wait.
And we know those and as we've talked about, and I'll show, and we know that it still isn't, our long-term budget picture. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You can finish your
No, I
sentence.
was just gonna say our long-term budget picture, is still unbalanced in the third and fourth year, so.
Can you clarify? I think I heard you say the budget assumption takes into account a declining enrollment. However, the levy authority calculation assumes a consistent enrollment. Is that correct?
The budget assumption is really based on that 5% change. So I'd have to go back to see, and it really, when you compared it to the levy authority, if I go back, which I don't have a slide for you, but if I go back and compare our budget assumptions compared to the original levy authority from OSP, pre the legislative change, our budget assumptions were actually higher than the levy authority. So, so the same for the reasons OSPI made the change in the levy authority, we were running up against is that over time, as that CPI, their estimated CPI of about 1.9% wasn't sufficient for the needs. So,
Do the budget assumptions take into account, is it kind of a flat, roughly flat 5%, or does it take into account all of the things that you just walked us through? Or is that sort of part of that 5%?
it really was a 5%, and we were comparing it, I mean, there's a point in time where you compare it to what the authority was, and we were so for the period from 22 to 26, our levy authority was higher than our voter approved amount. But that number, that gap was slowly decreasing. And in the 26, 30 timeframe, the gap would have been reversed. So the authority was starting to become lower than what our budget assumptions were going to do. So, but that was far enough out that we hadn't incorporated that into our planning because the legislature tends to change things. So we hadn't incorporated it that far out in our planning. So, and they did change things. So, so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's, it is a constant monitoring of kind of what the assumptions are, what we think the state is going to do versus what, you know, what our original assumptions were. So. Okay. So then I wanted to show a slide of kind of what's the levy impact by budget year as opposed to calendar year. So, so the first column is the graduated levy collection. So as we've shared before, when you have a calendar year levy, so the 2027, the new levy will impact half of our 26-27 budget. And then it will fully be realized in the 27-28 budget. And then the fourth year, we receive half of that in the 29-30 school year. So the levy collection is about, 47% of, so a 26-27 school year is about 47% of the 26 levy and about 53% of the 27 levy. And so the first column represents the school year, budget year collection amounts versus the kind of the original estimate collection amounts and the difference. Okay. All right. And then this is the same information, just, and then so then I wanted to kind of show if we assumed a declining enrollment, this would be the change in the levy collection by year, and the difference from our budget.
Which, if we have higher authority and we have declining enrollment, we wouldn't be able to collect that full
it,
authority.
right.
We would have to do a rollback process in November for the next year's collection.
Right.
So I asked for this slide because I think
Yeah.
it's important, as the data that I shared with the board on Friday, we are entering a school year that more than likely we're going to see a decline in student enrollment given our current data, which is what has been projected by Flow. And so while our assumptions for levy are, flat enrollment, and that's for planning purposes, the possible reality is that we won't meet that threshold because of our declining enrollment. And so this kind of shows possibly a different reality in terms of what we would actually be able to collect.
And same with your 27, your 2026 calendar year levy is based on your 24-25 enrollment. So you're always looking at the prior year. And so the challenge, so your levy authority is always also kind of a year, 2 years behind. So, because it's based on prior year enrollment. And I mean, they have to do it that way because that's when they have the actual information. But you're also being penalized, or your levy is based on a 2-year prior enrollment, and so you're not realizing kind of the expenditures you need in that actual year.
What does the declining enrollment do to the rate?
The rate, the per pupil amount.
No, the tax rate. So in our assumptions with flat enrollment, our AV assumptions, the graduated levy was 93 cents per thousand of assessed value. Do you
Yeah.
recall what it is in?
It should be, I don't have it, but it should be around,
It starts out at
Yeah,
93 cents, but I
let me
think it
just get
ends
it.
lower than that.
yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be lower than the 93
okay.
cents. So I'll have to calculate the rate based on the declining enrollment. So, yeah, I have it probably on a piece of paper in another file, but I will not dig it out right now. Okay. So that's my last slide for the EP&O before I move on to technology.
So yes, so before we move on, it would
Yeah.
be helpful just to hear from the board, reflect on what you heard, what maybe resonated with you, because the next time we're here in study session, we'll be bringing you a formal recommendation. And so would love to hear from the board just some thoughts and considerations as we're packaging that recommendation, knowing that we're also meeting with the Levy Advisory Committee next week.
Director La Liberty.
Thank you. Saw my face. Something I was struggling with was there was a slide on estimated local funding need, which had a total local need of 129.3 million.
Yep.
I'm having a hard time reconciling that with how much we're collecting right now of 30 million, basically $30 million less a year. I assume that number, that 129.3 million, is in some sort of future average dollars or something, right? Like over the 4 year. Is that right? It's over the 4 year collection period.
It's an estimated growth. It's kind of the, in the next kind of 4-year period. And so, so it's trying to look ahead on kind of inflating all of those things, the fixed cost increases, the compensation increases, trying to look at what those needs will be in 4 years out, knowing that, we won't know everything. So it's our best crystal ball estimate, knowing that things are going to change. And, should our insurance costs double every year instead of going up by $1 million, now they start going up by $2 million, then that's, something we haven't taken into consideration.
So, like, when we're thinking about this levy for me, one of the things I keep thinking about is like, okay, so what is sort of the maintenance level of, and I know that this is like somewhere between science and alchemy.
Yeah.
So like understand like that local need component is important, and even like understanding that like a year by year basis, if we're thinking
Okay.
about like a graduated approach,
Okay.
because I'm assuming I would, when I saw this slide, I just kind of assumed, okay, that's probably 4 years out what the local need is, but I don't
Yeah.
know the answer to that, and it
It-
probably is different each year. And so if
Yes.
we're thinking about like a graduated approach, that the local need, I'm guessing, is closer to $91 million than it is $129 million in the first year, or 99 million. Sorry, I'm just making numbers up right now. 99. So like
Yeah,
we
it's
have the budget assumption for this year, voter approved for 2026 is 99.1. We have a balanced budget
Right.
for at least next year. And so when I understood we had a balanced budget, I assumed that what we were collecting and levy authority was close, at least an approximation of what the local need was. And I know that gap is going to grow over time, but like when we're thinking about like what we're going to approve, like understanding what that gap is between the local need and what we're assuming right now in the budget year by year, I think it'd be really, like, to have that just like very explicit is
Okay.
helpful. Because I don't know, for me, like, maintaining our current operations is very important and vital. If we're if we're going to be asking voters to approve additional authority to add on to that, like, then it's a different proposition for me. Potentially.
And some of the budget work we'll do over the next year is how do we accurately represent those compensation step increases?
Yeah.
Because right now they're not well represented in our budget.
Long-term.
Long-term
Yeah.
budget. And so
Or short-term, yeah.
that's another factor that we'll be working on to get as precise as we can, because if the projections do play out, this will be something we're living with for the next 6, 7, 8 years in terms of a reduction in enrollment.
Director Stewart.
Okay. The fact that we have 4,000 students in low-income families, and that estimate or that number is, did you say, John, higher than most districts? Yet we have fewer Title I schools. I think that message needs to be taken to our legislators, not on the state level, but the federal level, to show that while, yes, we have a major abundance of money here, we also have a major abundance of low income here. And I think when they only see the Title I numbers, they think that that's our total number of students in low income are lower. And so I think if we could start emphasizing that 4,000 number when we talk to legislators, when we talk to the public, when we look at any analysis that we're trying to show that there is a need for money in Lake Washington, and that the local voters are the ones picking up the tab, if you will. I think they need to know that, and that the fact that the federal government doesn't pick up that tab by virtue of the way they classify Title I versus just spread out. I mean, there's kids in low income even up in Sammamish, but they're not as concentrated, shall we say. Anyway, just some messaging thoughts.
Director Choi.
I agree with Director LaLiberty in that it'd be interesting to see the graduated maintenance level year over year, with an added caveat of what a loss in federal funding would require in those years, because I would say that that's part of maintaining our current levels of services. And then to see what that does in a change to the rate, if it does change it. I think I'm also struggling a little bit with understanding how much of enrollment is a factor in the calculation of our levy authority, as well as our budget assumptions around our levy. I understand it's complicated, that there's like multiple things that are being considered at AV. Like there's a lot of things that go into coming up with that number. But considering how much is sort of unknown around our enrollment, I have some questions maybe around if that levy authority makes sense. Like if everything else in our budget we're planning is declining in enrollment, and then we're asking our voters to approve a levy authority at consistent enrollment, it doesn't make sense to me. So just maybe some clarification around how much enrollment is a factor in calculation of authority.
So one of the reasons that we have used stable enrollment for levy planning purposes is it's kind of hedging, because I think all of us have a wonder related to our enrollment. I mean, we know the flow projections. They've been consistent over the last 3, 4, 5 years that we're going to start to decline in enrollment. And we see significant construction continue in all areas of our district. And so let's say the projections don't decline, and we continue to see a gradual increase year over year. Well, a flat levy assumption for enrollment, we actually wouldn't be accessing our full authority in an environment where we're having growth in student enrollment. And so it's a way to kind of hedge in terms of long-term opportunity. And I understand what you're saying, because our budget assumptions,
Right.
we we show a declining enrollment in our budget assumptions.
I think the other factor that goes into the levy authority calculation is the CPI growth that is set by, the state every year. And again, they provide estimates, and those estimates continually change. And so right now, we're using their estimates, and that's an area you could also provide kind of cushion, so to speak, because the reality is if we look at the last 6 years, the OSPI estimates or the CPI has actually been provided at a higher rate than their initial estimates, which is part of the reason that the current authority is higher than our voter-approved amount, because OSPI has changed those amounts over time. 1 year, they had a 9% CPI that they provided. So that's another area that districts look at in their estimates.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I guess the difference for me is previously we didn't go out for our full authority. And so we were never asking for, yes, we were still using the calculation of stable enrollment, but then we were not asking for our full authority amount when we passed our levies. And we're talking about going out for our full authority. So then it's more of a question of, okay, now we're talking about, we're in our budget, we're saying that we're going to have declining enrollment, but then we're going out and asking for a full authority, which is assuming stable enrollment. And so that, I think that's confusing.
In our 2022 levy, we asked for full authority in EP&O.
I think we have to tie the word. We're asking for full authority based on assumptions, and we know that those assumptions will change. And so because you are planning really 6 years out, it is wise and prudent, just like we provide contingency in our budget should things change. It is wise and prudent to provide contingency in your levy in case things change. So that is it's something we, again, in the days, rollback was something we did on a regular basis. So it was a normal practice, because of the long range planning that needed to take place, or the 6 year planning is so that you're providing, you're just providing, you don't want to estimate too low.
And for clarity too, yeah, that was my understanding too, is that the 2022 levy was sort of our best guess at that time.
Yes.
Crystal ball of what full authority would be. But then we know next year we're leaving essentially $19 million on the table. So effectively that was the delta of sort of the error that's been introduced, and,
Right.
and yeah, I think that's, I feel like I think with the numbers I'm seeing here, I'm concerned we're going to be in a similar situation or looking at a similar gap in 4 years. $19 million would have meant no budget adjustments last year at all necessary. Like if our crystal ball had been a little bit more clear back in 2021 or whatever, then that we would be in a very different position here. I'm balancing that concern with also recognizing the very real tax fatigue in our community and sort of how do we explain what it is we're doing here. But that is my concern with the numbers that I'm seeing. Really in both scenarios, and of course it's more in the graduated scenario, although I do think the graduation makes a lot of sense, just sort of from a not if we and I forget if I guess it was in here somewhere of having the rate decline over the 4 years. I don't know that I love that either, but yeah, that's you asked for thoughts, and that's those are some of my thoughts, is that I just from a pure funding perspective, not how do we balance that with sort of what our community can or will support. I'm concerned that we're going to still be leaving money on the table here. Director Stewart.
Although I share your concern about us losing the money, I think the tax fatigue that you referred to, and I'd even call it anger with some folks, necessitates us to do this stair step, because you see them. I think the voter then sees, or the homeowner then sees, his and her dollar amounts going up gradually as opposed to a leap. And I think they can swallow that easier than being force-fed a gallon of it instead of an ounce. And I think it's almost a necessity. Even though we're leaving money on the table, I think it's one of those things that it's either stair-step it and lose a little, or make a major leap and maybe miss that leap.
Director Choi.
I'm looking at slide 8, and I'm curious, do we have any idea? I imagine the percent change in authority, or like the amount of money we left on the table by not having the full authority for all 4 years, 2022 through 25, would have been different if they didn't let us keep enrollment at 31,392 for those 3 years, because we had a much larger drop in enrollment for those 2 years. So without that caveat of like districts were held whole because of the pandemic, that number of 19 million would have been significantly less, correct?
I wouldn't say significant, but what I can put together, what might be helpful, even though it's really from the past, but I might put together kind of what our original estimates were for 2022, when we did them in 2020.
Yeah.
What they originally were, and what they ended up to be, and just kind of show the delta, what changed over time, both in enrollment and CPI, and what impact that had. So. Ultimately, the gap with those years on slide 8, 21 through 23, again, I'd have to go back and look at what what our voter approval amount was compared to the authority, but ultimately you're back, 2024 is back based on actual enrollment. So you can see the levy authority still, it wasn't that it was higher and then all of a sudden it dropped. It still was a graduated increase in levy authority, even though our enrollment dropped from 23 to 24. In 2023 to 2024, our enrollment, about 800 students. The enrollment for the LID, our actual enrollment did not drop that much in that year. So.
Let me see if I can restate what I think I heard from the board. that there's general appreciation for a graduated approach. Well, even with that, there's possible concerns, but that in general, that's a positive approach, that demonstrating the year-over-year difference between local costs and collection is going to be important moving forward. There's some level of hesitancy by some to ask for anything over maintenance level, while others on the board believe asking for dollars beyond maintenance level is necessary. And that last comment I just made makes my task complex. So thank you for that complexity. But no, I think that's what I heard from you.
All right. So I'm going to talk about technology and capital projects levy. That's the second levy that needs to be renewed in February of 2026. And so a reminder that our capital projects levy supports both technology and facilities. It's one levy made up of two parts. And so again, our facility focus provides essential funding to support our, improve and upgrade our school buildings, and that we receive really no state support on. The state gives us a little bit of material supplies and operating costs for maintenance, but the majority of that is really supported by our levy. So supports our safe, efficient, and inclusive learning environments, and addresses our aging infrastructure, enhancing our spaces, and ensuring health and safety compliance. So it's important that we invest in our facilities so we can preserve these critical assets and support our students. And then the technology portion supports teaching, learning, and operations where the district receives less than 20% of funding from the state. So it allows the district to maintain infrastructure, replace our equipment, provide digital tools that support instruction, and it funds training for staff and support critical business and communication systems. And so again, it ensures our students and educators have the tools they need to succeed in modern learning environments. We brought in June, again, some options related to capital projects. And so the technology piece, you'll see the recommendation, and we are making a recommendation informally to maintain the current funding levels for technology given the needs of the overall program. We are able to secure the E-rate reimbursement for the specific projects. That was a concern that was brought up in June. And so that will be about 34.6 annually. And then the facility is funding the full scope of the facility projects that we had identified. And this isn't a small increase in overall funding for facilities. It would average $27.1 million annually. And the tax rate implications for that is 6 cents per 1,000 of AV. And again, I'll break that down into a little more detail. So this is a reminder of what the main categories on the facility side. We have 4 main categories. We'll go over the dollar amounts. In June, there's the detail of what was funded in each of those categories. So I didn't provide that here. That's in the June presentation. But the amount by category, so the building systems improvements, it's about $8.5 million annually. Site improvements and athletic and play fields, $13 million annually. School and program improvements, about $3.9 million, and then the code compliance, health and safety, $1.3 million for $27.1 million annually. The 4-year total is in the last column. So again, funding all recommended projects, and a lot of Many of the projects include upgrades to tracks and stadiums and multipurpose field additions. This is an area that is highly sought by our community, keeping our athletic fields, upgraded, and then also adding turf to some fields on a ongoing basis, and then that allows those fields to be used year-round, later into, so basically all seasons, and then it's important in our facilities levy also is just maintaining that reserve capacity, because we know that construction and inflation is really an area with significant unknown impacts. Brian made a comment, I met with him last week, and he said, yeah, this last 4-year levy has been the most challenging to getting the projects done, given the dollars that we have and given the significant inflation that's incurred in this area. So, and then on the technology side, these are the 5 categories on the technology side of the levy. And then these are the dollar amounts. And so you have your technology infrastructure and support, 6.2 million, equipment, 14.5 million, instructional software and support, 3.6, business and technology systems, 4.8, and then the training and professional development, 5.5. So overall, 34.6 million. The 4-year total is about 138 million. So as we mentioned, the recommendation is really funding their maintenance level request. And so that there was about a $10 million potential increase that is not part of this. And then because the E-rate will be available, and they also have a little bit of carryover from the current 4-year levy that can fill any gaps. So that will be able to help them with that. So wanted to show kind of the implications for the technology and capital projects levy. The middle columns are the dollar amounts per year, and then the average per year at the bottom. And then we had initially showed you this rate would be 46 cents in the first year, declining to 42%. So this is kind of more facility dollars up front. And getting those dollars in, sooner. And then it's hard to see that I'm changing slides, moving from this slide. What I did after our June presentation is I changed, I kind of redid, it's the same total dollars over the 4-year period, but I changed how they're, less dollars up front and more, throughout the 4-year period. And so the rate is a level rate of 44 cents. And then I'll show that visually in some slides going forward. And that really ends our technology levy pieces. So if anybody has any questions on those.
Yeah, questions or
Any
comments
comments,
about that?
Director Liberty?
The funded projects for the informal recommendation,
Yeah.
does that include upgrades at Kamayakin and Evergreen for the field and track?
It does, yes.
Yes.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Because I just remember in the June presentation, we had sort of the 1, 2, 3 priorities. So this is priority
Yeah,
1
includes those,
and
yep.
priority 2.
This funds all priority
all
levels that
priorities. So
Brian
that's the-
brought forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
Redmond Middle,
1 through 3.
Rose Hill, field and track upgrades, Evergreen, Kamayakin, field and track, and then a multi-purpose field at Redmond Middle.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
How do the upgrades at Kamayakin Evergreen square with also those schools being under construction, or is that so that would be funded separately from the buildings, or how exactly would that
Yeah,
work?
so right now, the construction, the construction budget includes if any of the fields or parking lots have to be, if you're moving the building on those, then the construction projects funds, putting them back in their kind of current state, the levy would include upgrading those, and that's turf, those are the field and track upgrades, so that's turf on those fields. So that if, now, depending on, you know, construction budgets at the time, if there's any possibility that we're underspent on our construction budgets, then we will use those dollars and pay for as much of the field projects as we can out of those.
Thanks, that makes sense. And yeah, so just to be clear,
Yes.
you wouldn't be like putting in a turf field and then ripping it up to relocate it somewhere else.
Exactly,
That would
right.
make
Yeah, we're not gonna do
no
that.
sense. Yeah,
Right.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Director Stewart.
The professional development dollars for tech, is that engaging our growth and our need to educate our kids in AI? So we have to basically first educate the instructors. Is that having a major impact yet, or is that down the road still? Because it seems like it should be now, to be quite frank, but
Yeah, the AI conversation is, I'll say it's evolving, primarily because of our requirements related to student privacy data and all of those elements. There's very few AI tools, be it our, you know, ChatGPT, Copilot, I mean, any of them that actually meet the threshold of required privacy and protection for students. We have a tool called Magic AI that we're providing training for administrators and staff. That is a tool. If Scott were here, he would tell you about Magic AI. I'm not Scott, and I don't have that knowledge with me right now. But yes, as we can lean into that, we've done trainings with teachers related to really how the tools can help enhance their work that isn't directly with students. So yes, as it becomes available and accessible, we'll use those funds to train.
until the tool comes along that we're looking for, or that's acceptable security-wise, I think it's imperative that we also start stepping up the critical thinking aspects of our education for our students, so that when we do get to that point and we can use AI, or when they exit our system and they start encountering AI, they know how to use it effectively as a tool, not a crutch, but also they can separate fact from fiction. So I think we need to start looking at how we start stepping up either our course offerings for critical thinking, whether that's debate, journalism, whatever, or just stepping up how we address that within the current curriculum.
Okay. All right, so then we wanted to bring back some of the options, just to show you visually kind of the differences. So just a reminder, this is a slide of our current levy rate. I added one more year, so we've got 2 years of actual. 2026 is still an estimate. So you can see, again, the pink is our EP&O, green is our capital tech and facilities, and then the blue is our expiring levies, or our current construction levies and expiring bonds. Then the scenario with full EP&O authority and recommended capital. And so what this shows is the full EP&O authority, and that's a tax rate estimate of $1 or 15 cents more than the estimated 2026 number. And then for our capital projects, technology and facilities, it's 46 cents or 5 cents, and there's an extra decimal in there. 5 cents for that. And then what we did is just show kind of the impact of the two levies rather than including construction. The voters have already approved that, so that's a 20-cent change. The total rate with construction is $2.87, but 20 cents is really $200, you know, for $1 million home is the equivalent. Okay. So the home valued $1 million, the total levy is $2,870, but the change, the 20-cent change, is about $200. So, annually, yeah. So then, So this is the chart that represents that, and there's a little bit of a problem with my fly-ins, but I'm gonna just fly in all the rates on top here. So this shows the full authority EPO and recommended capital. So the box, the black box is around the 4 years that would go before voters. And so you can see it starts at $1 per thousand, it goes to 93 cents per thousand. And the capital levy goes from 46 cents per thousand to 42 cents per thousand. And that would be the rate, and the rates would slowly decline because our construction levies and bonds are declining. Okay? As well. Okay, and then just full authority, so just some of the benefits and challenges, we talked about these last time as well, but able to maintain and grow educational programs that support community needs. It focuses on the impact of students, provides for our planned capital and tech projects. The technology is supported by community. Students benefit from improvements faster, it supports needs. Some of the challenges is the fatigue we've talked about, and then just community understanding of need and the higher tax rate. So then the other option is the graduated EPO option, same capital. So the graduated EPO steps up to the full EPO by the 4th year. So that tax rate estimate is 93 cents, a difference of 8 cents from the estimated 26 rate. And then 5 cents on capital, so a total of 13 cents. And then this is visually what that looks like. So it would go, and the reason it's important to bring in, the 2024 school or calendar year levy rate is you can see that, the EP&O and capital was around the 44 cents and 91 cents in 2024. So again, benefits, maintains the stable tax rate for our community, able to maintain and grow educational programs, provides for our planned capital and technology projects. Similar, and then challenges, doesn't necessarily meet the educational objectives identified over the next few years, could require redirection of EP&O funds due to continuing higher costs. There was some question about, does it make sense to fully fund capital without fully funding the EP&O? And then I also did one more scenario of the graduated EP&O and then kind of a level capital rate. So instead of that declining rate that starts at 46 cents, this shows the capital rate at 44 cents. So a 3 cent difference from 2026, or 11 cents overall for both the EP&O and the capital. And so this is visually what that looks like. So you can see, again, the red or pink is 93 cents ongoing, and then the green is 44 cents level, and then the blue, while it's a slight increase, the voters previously approved an increase in 2027, then it slowly declines over the next 4 years. So just some benefits, really the same as the prior scenario. So I won't reread all of those again. Yep.
Can I ask a question on this?
Yeah.
So for one of the challenges doesn't make sense to fund capital without funding EP&O. I agree with that statement and concept, I think. But what I don't understand is the assumption, I guess, in that statement being a challenge is that this approach would not fully fund EP&O. And I'm not sure if that's true or not. I don't know what I guess I don't know what it means to fully fund EP&O in this statement. I don't know what that means. It's not asking for full EP&O authority, but I don't know if that's the same thing as fully funding the local need. That again, I'm going back to the same thing I was asking before, but what is the local need each year? I agree, it doesn't make sense to not raise enough money to meet the maintenance level. and at the same time increase capital. Like, I think that's out of line with my priorities at least. But I'm just not sure if that's what we're actually doing here or not in this. Did that statement make sense to anyone else? Okay, great. Okay. But yes, I agree.
Okay.
That's a challenge.
Okay.
I'm just not sure if it's applicable.
Okay. And then I just wanted to remind, I showed this in June, but the EP&O rates that were on and capital rates that were on the 2022 ballot measures were $1 per thousand and 49 cents per thousand. So those are the rates that are our original commitment to voters. And so I just showed these proposed kind of options. On the left, you have full authority, EP&O, and recommended capital. So that's just showing the dollar and the 46 cents going down to 42 cents, the dollar going down to 93 cents. And then in the middle is the graduated EP&O and recommended capital. So that's a 93 cent EP&O, and that stays level. And then the capital goes from 46 cents to 42 cents. And then the very last box is they're both staying level. So EP&O at 93 cents and tech capital projects at 44 cents. And again, these rates are still below the original commitment to voters from 2022. Okay, so then just the next steps are really our timeline. So again, we're here tonight at the study session. We have a levy advisory committee meeting next Tuesday. We will be bringing on September 15th a recommendation, sharing that at a study session and at the board meeting, providing a presentation with the goal to take action at the October 6th board meeting. And then the November and then in the November and December board meetings, there's things that are required for the voters pamphlet. We also have to submit pre-ballot approval for the EP&O levy to OSPI. And then the resolution, the final deadline is a resolution needs to be filed by December 12th for election, to be on the election for February 10th. And then all during from October to February is what we call the informational campaign. That's when we provide presentations and provide information to our staff and community about the upcoming levies. So, and that concludes the information tonight.
Any questions from the board, comments? Director Choi.
Can I just say thank you for all of the iterations that you provided and the different versions and options? Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
One concern I will throw out about the level rate for technology and capital projects is that does really sort of backload the funds, or we'll have fewer funds. We'll have fewer funds in hand up front, and just given that is capital projects, and we know inflation has been a real challenge. While I like the idea of a level tax rate, it may not make sense in that particular circumstance, just given what is being funded actually matters there. But yes, thank you for all of the work here. If there are no further comments, since there are no other agenda items, the August 4th, 2025 study session is now adjourned.